Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Wall Street Skinny. I'm Jen,
I'm Kristen.
and we are two lifelong friends with a combined 25 plus years of experience working and teaching on Wall Street, back with installment number 2 of our season 3 recap of HBO's Succession. And full disclosure, this was the episode that I had the most fun editing of, I think, any one of our podcast episodes. You guys will see there's one not to be like you have to listen to this episode and I'm not going to tell you what's in it, but we make absolute fools of ourselves today. So hopefully you guys will enjoy. Please don't think too negatively of us not being able to remember specifics from the 90s because it's really embarrassing that we can't. But before we get into it, I just want to catch up really, really quickly. I know that last time when we spoke, you hadn't yet started watching House of the Dragon, and now you're all the way into season 2. I mean, congrats, by the way. It's a busy week.
Yeah.
So what do you think so far?
So have I been living under a rock, or was it as big? I feel like it's becoming more mainstream. I don't know if I just started watching it, so now I'm noticing it. But
we're getting fed a lot of content on TikTok and Instagram, so I think it makes it seem like it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. Also, because I watched this. I think it's really just the algorithm, keeping us in an echo chamber of yes, everyone is watching House of the Dragon. Everyone's talking about it. It's no, it's the same 5 people.
But there are. I mean, some of the financy people that we follow have said happy House of the Dragon Day to all who celebrate, and then there was this really great meme. Yeah, there was this meme that I think our friend Kim Taylor shared, and it was basically our 2 choices for president. And it was a picture of Joffrey and a picture of Viserys dying in his deathbed as he's, and it's but it was
okay, that's phenomenal. I did not see that. Good on you, Kim.
Yeah. So anyway, I wasn't sure if it's just become more mainstream. But anyway, sorry, what were you going to say? Because you had something you wanted to say about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon.
Oh, well, so you were saying that it was the same intro music. It was not, okay?
It is.
So season 1, no. So season 1 was a totally different thing. It was did they keep the old season 1 opener with the blood running through everything, or did they totally switch that to the tapestry?
It was the same music.
Yeah, but it was not. It was it was the crappiest intro.
It was a stupid intro. Yeah.
It was a stupid intro. But now with the tapestry, it's good. And honestly, I still think, and I'm probably wrong, but I don't remember it being the same music when it first aired last year. I could be wrong. I don't know.
The very first episode, they did not have it. And after the second, because I am such a music person. I love intros to HBO shows.
Right.
I literally have on my Spotify playlist White Lotus. I have the Succession theme song. I have, the Game of Thrones. So for it to come back, it's all the feels. I'm oh my God, I'm back in the Game of Thrones land. So, which is, by the way, a terrible land. And I've never been more disturbed by an episode that I've watched in my entire life than watching the season 2 premiere. But,
very
it's one
bad.
of those things where you still it was not good, but you still power through.
Well, having had to teach myself the Game of Thrones theme song on the piano for our little course that we're building out, I'm very emotionally attached to it. Okay, but the only reason we talked about House of the Dragon last week was because it shares so much in common with Succession. Sorry, what were you going to say?
By the way, one other commonality with Succession is I was saying how it's the creepiest siblings ever. I was wrong. The freaking Targaryens, creepiest siblings ever. So that's just one little correction I wanted to make. It's I don't know how we got from in the Game of Thrones, everyone being correctly horrified by Cersei and Jaime, to then people being I'm rooting for Daenerys and Daemon, who are niece. And anyway,
well, listen, it's the old Tolstoy quote, right? All happy families are alike. All unhappy family are unhappy in their own way, right? It's the same thing, okay? The Succession siblings are just as bad as the Targaryen siblings. It's just, in a more modern way. That's all. Incest is old. Okay, so on that note, let's get into it with our, we're going to pick right up where we left off. I think it was after the episode where they had the board of director, sorry, not the board of directors, the shareholders vote that then ultimately ended up being a non-issue because they reached an agreement on the deal, and we're going to segue from there and finish out the season.
Yeah. And this is where then they get the call from the president of the United States, who lets them know that he's stepping down, which gets us into the next drama. So here we go.
All right.
Okay, so we have to actually, let's backtrack a little bit. One thing that was happening back in episode 1 is that as Logan starts to get worried about whether or not the president is on his side, they decide to almost have a smear campaign against the president. And so, because they know, like via ATN, that news network where, again, think Fox News, right? This is like their propaganda arm. They're trying to condition watchers to sort of know how to feel about the president. They decide to turn on him.
So they go to basically the Tucker Carlson figurehead within ATN, and he's been a big supporter of the president.
Was he the one who was the Nazi
sympathizer? Yes.
Yeah.
So Mark Ravenhead is, I believe, his name.
Yes.
And Tom goes to Mark and says, this needs to be the nature of your content going forward. It needs to be less favorable towards the president. We need to put some heat on the president to flex some muscle and let him know that he needs to be supportive of WayStar and of Logan. And Mark's like, I don't take orders from you. Yeah. And Shiv goes in and says, hey, this is basically an order direct from my dad. You have to do this. So Ravenhead launches a series called, I think it's called, Is the President Losing His Grip? ?
Yes.
And it's funny because they try to justify it by saying like, well, there's a question mark at the end. Like we're making a two-sided debate. Obviously,
just asking questions.
And I mean, it's funny because this season aired years ago at this point. And right now, we're not going to get into the political climate here in the US, but you open any newspaper and is the president losing his grip? Is the president in the grips of dementia? I mean, these are the headlines that we are seeing literally right now. So this happens. So the president calls up Logan. Logan is literally having a meltdown because he's off his meds, so he can't come to the phone. So they decide that Roman's going to take this phone call.
Oh, it was Roman. You're right. It wasn't Jerry. Yeah.
And Roman takes this phone call with the president who says, thanks to your coverage of it turns out he does have a neurological condition. He says, I don't want to put my family through this smear campaign any longer. So congratulations. I will not be running for a second term. And Roman's completely unable to salvage the conversation or excuse their behavior. So in their attempt to strong arm the president, who was obviously their ally against the DOJ, they have now lost this ally entirely and now need to curry political favor with whomever will be his successor, right? Again, the theme of succession continues because they have lost this extremely powerful playing card that they have in the White House. And so this is an unmitigated disaster for them. Now that launches into the next episode where they effectively choose the next president.
Exactly. So this is called What It Takes. And the beginning of it is essentially Kendall preparing with his lawyers. Ultimately, they get in with the DOJ. I don't think it goes well. It goes terribly.
And Kendall makes a big show in the hallway where the members of the DOJ or whatever can still hear him like, oh, it's never fair to the little guy, blah, 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 thinking that he's done some brilliant political move by doing so. And Lisa's like, you are totally screwing this up. You don't listen to me. You hired me and you are not taking my advice. And you are not the political maneuvering genius that you think you are. So he fires her because he doesn't want to hear that. He doesn't want to be questioned. He's just like his dad.
Yeah. But a less competent version. So it's just a less competent version.
Exactly.
But by the way, the scene opens, and I don't remember if you actually said this in the prior thing, where part of the deal that they made was that they were not going to be able to use PJs. Well, guess what? They're on a PJ in the beginning of this episode. They're flying to basically the equivalent of CPAC. Yeah.
It effectively materializes as a political fundraising party. They imply that this is where they choose the next president. Well, during the course of this party, a partygoer approaches Roman and reveals that their mother, Caroline, Logan's ex-wife, is remarrying and hasn't even notified them.
Oh, I forgot about that part. Yes.
That she is remarrying. Meanwhile, Greg, who has been put on notice by Kendall that Kendall intends to burn him, starts seeking advice from Tom as to how to stress about getting potentially burned. So one of the things that has been happening over the course of this season is as Logan tries to figure out what his strategy is going to be with respect to the DOJ, it becomes clear that someone may have to do prison time.
Yeah.
So Tom sits down with Shiv and they actually have a really interesting conversation. He says, what if I were to nominate myself to do prison time? Listen, with a good deal, maybe I'm only looking at 8 months. And at first she's like, no, of course not. And then she says, well, or it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
And first of all, this is unbelievably messed up. The thought of your spouse offering themselves up to do jail time.
And she says, this is smart because you'll get in good with my dad.
Right. And she's also clearly thinking about how it benefits her, right? Which she has been scheming. So for her, this is a win-win-win. And she doesn't have to deal with Tom while he's off in jail because she doesn't really like him. Yeah. So Tom goes to Logan and makes this offer. And Logan, of course, says no need, blah, blah, blah. But thank you. I appreciate it. And I won't forget it. As the season progresses, it becomes evident that all signs point to Tom going to jail. So Tom has been fretting about this now in varying degrees for several episodes.
And he's, talking about, well, this prison is better than this prison. And, I'm looking into how to make toilet wine. And he's so worried about it. And he keeps talking about it. And Shiv is clearly annoyed. She doesn't want to talk about it. And
at first she's like, no, don't even worry about it. It's not even guaranteed. By the third conversation, she's like, I don't want to hear any more about it. What do you want me to say? And it is funny because he's going through the prison blog.
They call him
and
Terminal
a prison
Tom.
consultant. Well, they call him the Christmas tree, right? And you can hang any charge that you don't want to be stuck to him because the impression, the assumption is that he's going away.
One question that I had, and I'm not sure if you probably do know the answer, because Greg goes to him at one point too, worried about also going to jail.
Because Kendall is now saying he's going to offer him up on a silver platter. And so that's what this conversation is.
Oh, got it.
Because Kendall has said, I'm going to burn you. So now Greg has known that Tom has been staring down the barrel of prison time. And he's like, how do you not stress about this and not think about it every second? Tom gives this insight into his emotional state where he's broken inside at the thought of going to prison. Yeah. And it's funny because while they are at CPAC or whatever it is, I guess wine samples from a vineyard that he and Shiv appear to have invested in or bought or whatever arrive. Yeah. And they're tasting it and they're trying to use the stupid wine terminology. He's like, it's earthy, right? It's fungal. It's whatever. It's clearly terrible wine, right? And it's got a screw top, which he's immediately dinged. It's really a metaphor for their relationship. He wants to have a baby. She doesn't. Yeah. She suddenly realizes that he's been tracking her cycles because he wants to have a baby together. And he's like, listen, if I'm away for 8 months, and she's like, what am I, an incubator? She does not want to have a baby. Tom is starting to really deteriorate mentally and emotionally as all this is going down. Meanwhile, Kendall back in New York City, while they're all in DC working on this political situation, he's self-imploding, but he's tossing around ideas for his 40th birthday party. One of them is end times, and he describes it as the Weimar Republic meets Carthage, meets Dante, meets AI and antibiotic-resistant superbugs. So, Kristen, just if you want to know what I'm planning for my 40th birthday party, okay, it's Dante meets AI and antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
Actually, it should just be a Succession-themed party, because that would be fun.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I keep that in mind because Kendall's 40th birthday becomes front and center, and I do want to talk about that more. But so Kendall sneaks down to DC to have a secret meeting with Tom. And Tom and Greg have been going to this diner where Tom is trying to acclimate to prison food by ordering, God forbid, an omelet and hash browns. So he's already met with Greg at this diner multiple times. He meets with Kendall there.
And one quick question before you go on, because Greg does say, it seemed like Greg was asking, because as you said, the Christmas tree, if Tom would essentially take this charge, and Tom agrees to it, which I was actually surprised by, because it also seemed like that was what got them back into each other's good graces. Because I actually almost thought that they were going together. So that's why I was confused why Tom would have agreed.
That was it. Because he's so broken. He doesn't even care at this point. And he doesn't really care about Greg. But think about Tom's psyche. He
just wanted someone to talk to.
He's been so broken down by Shiv. And then Greg, who is so far beneath Tom in Tom's estimation, asks Tom to take the fall for him. And Tom realizes what do I have left to lose? I don't even have Greg. Like, I'm not even senior to Greg in this family hierarchy. Greg is hanging his ornament on me. So 100%. But so you think that he's just completely broken. So Kendall calls this meeting with Tom and approaches him to turn on Logan. He says, hey, listen, if you come bolster my DOJ case, because he's fired Lisa Arthur, he's now like, I've got some new great lawyer. And Tom's like, another great lawyer? How many lawyers have you been on? And he basically says, if you come to my side and help me bolster my case at the DOJ against Logan, he implies that he'll get you out of jail. And he also implies that Shiv will respect Tom more if he turns on Logan, which is, I think, a really interesting thing that Kendall has sussed out what motivates Tom the same way that he understands how everybody else in the family is so motivated by currying favor with Logan. At that point, they've really prepped you to think that Tom's psyche is just at such a low that he might accept this offer. And he doesn't. He doesn't accept this offer. And he says, you know what? My hunch is that you're going to get fucked because you always do. And I've never once seen Logan Roy get fucked. Yeah. So Tom leaves that meeting accepting his fate, accepting that he's going to go to jail. He's going to go down with the ship because he won't.
Kendall tries to blackmail him by taking a picture of him. Yeah. And being like, I have this to show that you're meeting me. And he's just like, but again, there is a little bit of like, he's like, whatever. Like,
it's 100%. Yeah. So Tom may not be senior to anyone, but he's senior to Kendall at that moment in time. And that's the only victory he has. He actually walks back to meet with the family and walks by Greg getting carried on the shoulders of the CPAC guy who are all cheering fuck
because they're at, again, this conservative political action committee type place where people aren't exactly like pro environment. And so he's telling this story about how he's suing Greenpeace for his inheritance because he's upset that his grandfather is going to be giving away his inheritance. So they love that, like, oh, this dude's suing Greenpeace. So he basically becomes the hero. Now, behind the scenes, they're all trying to figure out who is the person that they should back. So that's the main plot of this episode is figuring out who is going to be the next president because they call him the raisin, the president. He is out. And now there are a number of contenders who they know if they can get ATN on board, and obviously it's their propaganda arm, right? Like if they can get ATN on board, that person will become the next Republican candidate. And so the options are they have
the existing vice president.
The existing vice president who is
someone
boring
that
as
supports.
Salgado, who is he seems like a more progressive conservative, so much more up Shiv's alley, like pro-democracy type. And then you have Mencken, who they ultimately go with, who is...
And that's Roman's candidate.
So Roman's candidate because Roman, I mean, he understands people. Like that's the thing about Roman. Like we saw that back in episode 2. He wanted to get at understanding Volter and what was making them tick. So he took people out for drinks and got it out of them instead of like sitting there studying. He gets people, he gets instincts, and he actually knows that this is someone who is a winner and wants to be on the winning side.
But also happens to embrace fascism.
So Roman basically goes into the bathroom with him and he says, I mean, fascists are cool, but kind of not. Is that a problem? And Mencken replies, I will borrow from anyone. So if Franco or Travis or Hitler, have a good pitch, I'm a man for all seasons. Mussolini. Yeah. And so he talks about people like people who look like them. Logan, because part of what he's trying to do is figure out who's going to be loyal to Logan.
Who's going to be my laptop?
So he calls up the vice president and says, bring me a Coke. And the vice president's like, it's 11 p.m. or something. And I guess he was like in bed. And the vice president's like, well, okay, like, can't you call room service type thing? But anyway,
he doesn't understand how the game is played.
He
thinks that's beneath me. Why would you ask me to do this symbolic favor that clearly means nothing?
Meanwhile, Mencken, when he comes in, he brings him a Coke. Like
that's all he does.
And so that's
the vice president sits down and has this whole conversation with Logan and dances around things and they talk policy. All Mencken does is drop a Coke on the desk in front of Logan and walks out. And that's when Logan decides to back Mencken.
Yeah, and Shiv is freaked out. She's like, Dad, he's fucking dangerous. People hate him. You have to go with the climate. To which Logan says, people said I was going down and I went against it. I'm a climate denier. And again, back to the Greenpeace thing. Like, it's just, the show is just beautifully written. Like, everything is hilarious. And so at the end, Logan wants to take a photo with Mencken and Shiv is there. And Shiv is like, no, I'm not taking a photo with this man. And Logan is basically like, are you part of this family or not? And so she goes and she sits there.
But she won't stand next to him. That's her.
She won't stand next to him. She just has to stand next to the fascist. She just has to be in the photo with the fascist.
All right, so on to episode 7.
Which is called Too Much Birthday. So this is Kendall's birthday episode, his 40th birthday.
I mean, here's the thing. I remember watching this originally and being like, oh my God, his 40th birthday party. Like, what's that like? And this was like 3 years ago. So it wasn't like mine was that far off. But now watching this, I mean, you just had your 40th birthday last week. Mine's coming up. I'm like, oh my God. Like,
I know.
this
Well,
is
I was
us.
looking.
Like, Kendall's our contemporary.
That is wild that we are his contemporary. We're not billionaires like him. Not yet, anyway.
Well, it's funny because in the first scenes of this episode, they show Kendall rehearsing singing a Billy Joel song that he's going to perform. And he's referencing like other elements that are going to happen. And you can see in the background some guys constructing a cross. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, you don't think it's going to be too much, do you? Like, clearly Kendall's going to portray himself like Jesus on the cross. Like, he is sacrificing himself for the greater good of humanity by trying to take his dad's company down. The ego is way out of control. And it's very clear that he's not reading the room from the beginning.
True. Yeah. But again, I mean, this whole episode, it's like each episode you get this manic swing because the episode starts and he has like these super high hopes for this major birthday bash. They have A-list celebrities. Like, they're looking at the list of people coming, one of whom is Lucas Matson, who is the CEO of Gojo, which is going to become a huge part of the next few episodes and into season 4. But then it's like a whole bunch of, like I said, A-list celebrities. Like, he's got everybody. Because again, he's a billionaire. He's part of the socialite kind of class. So he knows all these people. And it's going to be this huge blowout party. He was on top of the world. And as we're going to see as the episode goes on, it's like back to the theme that's like through the whole season is just he gets basically knocked down and he's at the bottom again in the end. But so in the next scene, Jerry talks to Logan and tells him that the DOJ is backing down, basically that Kendall had overpromised.
Kendall blew his deposition in front of the DOJ in the past episode when he fired Lisa. And so they took that and ran with it and decided that they're not going to go after anyone for prison time.
Yeah. And so this is where, by the way, Tom realizes he's not going to prison. But they say maybe some men were naughty back in the day, but nothing in a sanctioned, systematic way. So they'll pay a fine, but no prison time. And Logan touches Tom's hand and says, I will remember. So Tom, it actually was a little bit smart, even though it could have gone way the other way, but it's a little bit smart that he did that because he is now in.
Logan owes him a favor, and Logan never owes anybody favors.
Yeah. So Tom goes to see Greg in his sad little office closet.
Well, hang on. Also, Shiv is like, "This is great for the company," and totally forgets to congratulate Tom on this announcement until someone's like, "And also nice that your husband's not going to prison, right?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, of course." She totally forgets.
Yeah.
After he's been moaning and groaning about it and legitimately depressed for the better part of 4 episodes.
Yeah. So again, it just speaks where their relationship is at the time, which obviously comes back. And so anyway, Tom goes in to see Greg. So like the person that he wants to celebrate with is Greg. Like him and Greg have this like, again, very abusive, but like,
well, yeah, define celebrate.
Weird. He flips yeah, that's true.
He
flips over a desk and then starts jumping up and down saying no one's going to jail. But in the next scene, you also see Kendall. He has all these A-listers coming to the party, but the people that he cares about, but he like doesn't want to say he cares about, like his family, no one from his family has RSVP'd. So not the siblings, obviously not the dad. You can see that he's upset about this, but he's trying to be like, well, who cares? Like, whatever. So now we are back at the WayStar offices and Mattson was supposed to come meet Logan. They want to talk about this potential deal. And Mattson doesn't show. He sends like his CFO and members of his team, and Logan sees this as like a huge sign of disrespect. So he's just like, the meeting's canceled.
Well, and again, also, where's Mattson in the meantime?
Where was he?
He's getting ready to go to Kendall's birthday party.
Oh, you're right. But like, what do you have to do to get ready for his party? Is he like getting a spray tan?
I mean, it's Alexander Skarsgård. He doesn't need to do much to get ready for a party. But it's very much a gesture that he has accepted Kendall's birthday party invite, but is flexing his muscle and letting Logan know who's boss in this relationship and not showing up for the meeting.
Yeah. So they basically, Logan decides like the meeting's canceled. He doesn't care about the other people who had come. So Roman and Shiv.
Not only that, he says, let's revisit buying Pierce. The whole deal's
Yes.
off.
He's like, the
let's
deal's
go back
off
to-
because
Let's go back to plan A, which is buying this other newspaper. Everyone's like, what?
No,
and
yeah,
everyone's so
yeah.
afraid to stand up to him, but it's like, this old thing? Are you kidding me?
Mhm. Yeah. Everyone thinks that this is a good deal. So Gojo and Waystar just make sense. I think it was Roman who says, Dad, our streaming platform is shit. We have nothing that looks like growth. This gets us consequentially into streaming. It gets us into sports betting. It gets us into social media. And so then what they decide is that the siblings are going to go talk to Mattson at Kendall's party. And at the
Shiv
same
has
time,
also mentioned that she's concerned that someone else will outbid them and buy Gojo instead of them. And they're going to, so like you said, miss out on the strategic benefits of this deal and that they're cutting off their nose to spite their face, which we know Logan is very good at.
So now he knows that the kids are going to go to the party, and Logan asks Roman to give Kendall a letter, which we're going to come back to because it was consequential. So kids show up at the party, and this was wild.
By the way, he decided on the theme.
Oh, yeah. Well, the theme is they walk in, and they're walking into a birth canal. So they are walking into Caroline's birth canal. Because it's like Logan's being born, or no, sorry,
Did you
Kendall's
see the
being
sign
born.
on the outside of what he finally went with was the theme?
No, I didn't.
It was the notorious KEN, Ready to Die. Like the
God, Notorious
Biggie
B.I.G.
album. Yeah, the last
Notorious
Biggie
B.I.G.
album was called Ready to Die. And so again, Kendall is thinking of himself as this rap pop culture icon, but it's also foreshadowing because this birthday party that's going to kick off his downfall within the season. It's supposed to be the life cycle of Kendall Roy, like ready to die. So it starts with him being born into the birth canal. And then all of the different theme rooms that they have throughout it are supposed to be various episodes. It's kind of like the original Eras tour, if you will, but for Kendall, like all the different phases of his life.
Okay. I missed that part. I'm glad that you picked up on it because that's actually very interesting. And
he also has a replica of the WayStar offices within the party labeled hell with flames on a TV screen.
That's what that was. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a replica of the WayStar office. It's like the same couch. There's the Hall of Compliments where they have the staffers hiding in the flora and fauna, jumping out and being like,
oh, yes.
So perceptive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Tom gets so upset.
Right. The rooms throughout the party were hilarious. A brilliant piece of writing.
That is true. But when you said no, I'm like in my head, it's like Biggie, Biggie, Biggie. Can't you see? Sometimes the world just hypnotized me. That's because that was like. Well, anyway, I don't know if our
everyone
like our
knows
listeners
knows.
No,
they definitely
do you want to just give like the 2 second? Well, you should just. He was what? He was like a rapper who got shot.
Yes. Yeah.
When we are Els and millennials, we are Kendall's contemporaries. And so it was probably a big part of his childhood was the
anyway. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but this was part of like the 90s rap culture, which also was beset by infighting and feuding with the assassination of Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac being kind of like the East Coast, West Coast battles. And it actually is very timely because Notorious B.I.G. was in Puff Daddy's camp. They were friends. And Puff Daddy's ascendancy was largely due to his homages to Biggie
every step I take.
Yeah, that was with Faith Hill, who was, there were not Faith Hill. Is Faith Hill?
No, I think you're thinking. I know who you're talking about. I don't think it's Faith Hill. The Squeegees.
The Squeegees.
No, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure what's worse, me confusing Faith Hill and Biggie's widow. Are you calling the Fugees? Who it was not, by the way.
It was the
Fugees.
Fugees.
It was not the Fugees. You called them the Squeegees. Faith Evans was her name. Not right, Faith Evans. Yeah. And she was the vocalist who sang that. Oh my God, we need to be canceled immediately. And speaking of canceled,
what's wrong with the Squeegees? Yeah.
The Fugees, which is short for the refugees.
Oh, I never knew that.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
Well, why would I know that? The Fugees. Okay. Oh, that makes sense. This
Yeah.
all makes sense. This is why we need to do more of these episodes. Oh my God. Okay. So
Anyway, so the little pop culture lesson that we're definitely not
yeah.
qualified to give here, but it is timely because Puff Daddy, who is then rebranded as P.
Yeah.
Diddy and then Diddy, has just recently been canceled because of, I mean, there were continuous
Domestic
allegations
violence,
of domestic violence against him that were all kind of poo-pooed, even though he like bragged about them in his rap songs. Then this video has come to light of him abusing his ex-girlfriend Cassie, which is just absolutely horrible. But anyways, so yeah, there's all these different theme rooms throughout the birthday party, and Roman and Shiv show up along with Connor, who refuses to take off his coat.
Oh yeah. Which becomes a huge thing.
Roman and Shiv are only there to meet with Mattson, but
Yeah.
Kendall is harboring this hope that they really show up. Not really because they care about him, like under the auspices of like, oh, they'd show up because they care about them. But there's something about if someone shows up to your party, it's an implicit endorsement of your social standing with them, right? Like when you're a little kid and you have a birthday party, it's who's coming to my birthday party, right? That's like your cachet within the overall auspices of society. And Kendall wants them to show up at his birthday party as a show of like, oh, they're finally coming to kiss the ring, like this enhances my social standing.
Oh, interesting. See, I actually thought it was actually like less jaded or less. I thought it was because like he actually, as much as he puts out that he doesn't care, that he actually does. That it's still his siblings, it's still his family, and he's divorced, right? He no longer has a relationship with his dad, and I mean he does have his kids, but like.
But he doesn't like.
But that's
you're
absolutely his family, right?
Like I do think there is that longing, but I think it's tainted by his desire for power because when they first show up, he takes them into a room where he has made mock headlines on giant posters making fun of them. He's trying to assert his authority over them, and that's how people display love and affection in his family.
But see, I thought that was more just like he was kind of being funny because they're always so awful to each other. They joke and they make really like just below the belt jokes. But it still does seem like it's their really effed up, awkward way of being like, I love you. And
I agree, but the way that they express love in relationships is by exerting power over one another. And so I agree he has that longing for his family, but the way it manifests is a desire to be the belle of the ball.
Yes. But I still think there was like just deep down, just he wanted to know that it would all be all right. That even like if they're having these fights, that it's they still have a relationship. So then when they showed up, he thought, okay, maybe it means that like we're all okay-ish. Not really, but like
as okay as you can be in the Roy family.
Yeah. That it's
but okay always has to be on his terms. He has to be winning in that thing in order to feel good about it. And he's never winning.
Yeah. No, I agree. But again, it's like versus his father who has literally taken him out of the phone book entirely. At least his siblings still will show up, even if they don't respect him. But it's like they're just there. So when they show up, right? So they walk into the tunnel. Roman gives Kendall a card and he opens it. And the card
standing in the WayStar replica office of hell.
Of hell.
The flames in the background.
That's true. And he opens it and there's a term sheet to buy out all of Kendall's 12,904,663 shares for 156.20 for a total of a little bit over $2 billion. And so again, I thought this was interesting. So it's like the purchaser is the Roy Holdings Acquisition Corp, seller is Kendall Roy Trust. And Kendall's like not really sure what to do with it because he could get $2 billion, but also it's a sign that his father just wants him out of his life entirely. And so,
he doesn't care at all about that money. He is so hurt by this.
So Kendall tells Naomi, and she's like, maybe you should just take the money.
Take it.
Like $2 billion. You are in this horrible, toxic cycle.
Yep.
Get out of there. And he obviously can't. So the PR person, Comfrey, tells Kendall that Roman and Shiv are now asking about Mattson. And that's where he realizes that, shit, like they're not here for me. They're here because they want to talk to him. And so Kendall tells Mattson to go meet him in the treehouse, which is this like VIP area. Shiv and Roman find out that's where Mattson is gone. And Kendall's like, you cannot come in here.
He's like a little child throwing a tantrum. This is my birthday party. You can't come in this room. He's trying to exercise power in the most juvenile way possible.
Yeah. But the other thing that you find out is that Roman knew about this offer. Kendall says to Roman, I know you're only here to say me to Matson, and says, fuck you to Roman and to Dad for the offer. And she's like, what are you talking about? And Roman explains that if Kendall were to sell, he has to sell to someone. He would be selling to Roman. So Roman would be increasing his stake in the company and not Shiv. So now Shiv feels like she's been stabbed in the back because of this. So now Shiv is actually starting to turn against Roman. Roman's arc in this episode is also really interesting because he basically, like at the end of this episode, becomes horrible. But we'll get to that in a second.
So within this episode, Kendall does see his ex-wife at the party. He always kind of is harboring this long lost feeling for the family he could have had he not become a drug addict. And he does definitely, I think, still have feelings for his ex-wife.
Yeah.
And his children had made him a present wrapped in rabbit wrapping paper. His kids are like going through a rabbit phase, which I think like
and actually in the episode where Logan was seeing dead animals, there was this one part where I actually thought that it was a little bit symbolic because their kids had gotten this pet rabbit. They wanted to give the rabbit a bagel. And the nanny was like, it says on the internet that we shouldn't give rabbits bagels. And he's like, it's fine. Just let them have a little bit. And then I guess they do. And then the rabbit gets sick. And then they want to like bring the rabbit to the vet. And he's like, bring it to the doctor. And she's like, I don't think the doctor knows how to like treat rabbits. And anyway, the whole thing was, I mean, I forget why I thought it was a metaphor for the entire arc of what was happening at the time, but it did seem like it was.
Well, it definitely was in multiple aspects. Part of it is what an absentee father Kendall is, that he does these symbolic gestures for their kids, but he has no idea who his children are. He's not really involved in their lives. They're being raised by their mother and they're being raised by a team of nannies. He's like, just make it go away, out of sight, out of mind, feed the rabbit a bagel. And when something goes wrong, the rabbit gets sick, it's, how can I throw money at this problem? This isn't my problem. Why did you let this happen? This isn't my fault. But if all he had to do was like take 5 minutes to spend a little time with them. But what's interesting is his ex-wife lets him know that the kids had made him a present. And that's actually something genuine. That's something from his children. That's the one thing that exists at this party that is real and from someone who loves him, and it's his children, and he can't find this present. So it's very symbolic that he's looking for it and looking for it and looking for it. And Naomi says, well, if you can't find it, here's my gift. And she's given him an expensive watch. He opens the present and she's like, I'm a terrible gift giver. You know, it's a stupid present. Just leave it. And he's looking for an inscription on the watch, something that would give any indication that this was a symbol of love and affection and genuine feeling. I mean, she might as well have just written him a check for $40,000 and made it out to cash and say, here's your birthday present, right? Yeah. So it's all part of that downward emotional arc. There's no one at this party that genuinely cares about Kendall. He's ultimately all alone at the end of the day.
But what he does do before that happens is he goes to Matson and he says, it makes no sense for them to buy you, meaning WayStar to buy Gojo. What? Amtrak buys Tesla? If anything, you should buy him. So it is funny how, again, Kendall, Kendall though like this advice. Whole thing, he has great advice. He's the one who came up with the whole deal in the first place. And now he's basically there trying to, I don't want to say sabotage the deal, but like, I think he's trying to be a little bit like, well, fuck you guys. Like, you're really going to do this? Let me get in his head and actually flip this around on you. So anyway, I thought that was a really interesting point.
So Roman and Matson finally get to meet. And when I first watched the series, I genuinely didn't have this impression of Roman as being a competent negotiator, generally speaking. But you mentioned earlier that he really does read people well. And he figures out quickly how to talk to Matson on his level. You just made Kendall's point of why should Amtrak buy Tesla? But he's talking to Matson and says, hey, people say we fit. Legacy media and tech. They don't fit, right? Like that doesn't fit at all, but he's making the pitch. And Matson says, how soon is your dad going to die? He doesn't want Logan hanging over him. And Roman is visibly upset by the question. So he comes up with a plan to pitch to Matson, says, you never have to deal with Logan, okay? We're going to keep everything separate and everything's going to go through me.
Yeah.
And Mattson keeps criticizing Waystar and criticizing specifically Stargo, which is that Waystar streaming platform that we talked about. And to bond, Roman suggests they literally piss on the app. So they open Mattson's phone, or I think it's Roman's phone. It's definitely Roman's phone. They open it up. They throw it in the urinal. It's still loading. It's got the wheel of death, right? Trying to load this app. They go through this symbolic gesture of pissing on the phone.
Yes.
And then Mattson agrees to meet with Logan. So Roman is willing to stoop however low he needs to go and humiliate himself and humble himself because he has no dignity. He has no pride. And that's why he's such a successful negotiator in so many ways, because it's actually really never about his ego the same way that it is with the other siblings. With Shiv, it's always about her. She needs to be top dog. And with Kendall, it's always about his pride too.
Yeah.
Rowan doesn't really have any pride. And that is what consistently makes him so successful in negotiating with these people, because they get to feel like whoever he's negotiating against gets to feel like they have the upper hand.
Yes.
Kind of emotionally.
And he actually, though, at the end of this episode, Roman is starting to be at the very end just a complete bully to Kendall. Kendall, I mean, he is at the lowest he can be. He just wants to leave the party and go home. He can't find his kids' presents. He just wants to get out of there. He doesn't care anymore. And Roman is still there to fight, to the point where even Shiv says, like, stop. Like, what are you doing? And he just looks like a complete jackass at the very end. But the funny part about this whole thing is that at the beginning of the episode, Tom was so happy because he had just escaped prison. He was going to this party and he takes some cocktail of drugs, but he's so happy. And by the end of the episode, I guess the cocktail of drugs didn't work as he was expecting. And so he was like really bummed out. And then he's like walking through the compliment thing and he's like yelling at people. And somehow like Greg is happy. I forget why. And Tom is
because
so
he's
mad.
not going to jail either. He's got a second lease on life.
But
because Kendall was going to quote unquote burn him.
Oh, true. And Greg wanted to go out with Comfrey, who was the PR person for Kendall. And Kendall tells him not to. And Greg decides to just ask him it anyway. So I think he's really happy that he's like got this date with this girl who's like way out of his league. But Todd is so angry that that Greg is happy.
That Greg
he's like, that this was supposed to be my happy time. So Tom is depressed because he was happy, but now he took this bad cocktail of drugs, so he's depressed.
But it has nothing to do with
Shiv
the drugs.
Is upset.
It has to do with the fact that the actual reality of living his life is miserable. So he has escaped this terrible fate only to be thrown back into the terrible fate that is his life.
True. Yeah.
Being married to a woman who doesn't love him, who's dancing, by the way, on the dance floor like a crazy person.
Reminds me of like the Elaine dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone just ends up depressed.
Everyone loses.
Somehow Greg.
It's Game of Thrones. Everybody loses. Nobody wins. Yeah.
And so now we go into the wedding of Caroline. So episode 8, Chianti Shire. Is that how you pronounce that?
Chianti Shire, I think.
Chianti Shire. Okay. I know the wine Chianti, so I'm assuming it's somehow related to that. It's in Italy, right?
I think it's a joke, right? So it's Italian wine country, but she's British, right? So
I thought it was a real place. I like that better. It probably is.
Doubt it. I assumed it was a play on words. Is there
a
real place called Chianti Shire? Chianti Shire is a nickname for an area of Tuscany, Italy, where many upper-class British citizens have moved or usually spend their holidays. So it is exactly what we expected. It is a play on both words. Although to be fair, I thought that the showrunners came up with it because it's very funny, but apparently it's a joke beyond the show.
Got it. So in this episode, it opens up with Logan and Roman telling Stewie and Sandy, so again, Sandy's daughter, ahead of the board meeting that they are in talks to acquire Gojo. And they are not thrilled and think it feels like an ambush, but they also don't hate it. And so Shiv calls in, doesn't go to the meeting because she's still upset about the night before for whatever reason. And then they ultimately fly to Italy for Caroline's wedding. Caroline is just so awful. The man that she's marrying seems like he's marrying her solely for access to Logan. Like Kendall shows up and says, can we divvy up the events because Logan doesn't want to be in an event with you? And Kendall was like, why do you care about if Logan's here? He's your ex-husband. I'm your son. And she's like, well, it's because the man, he wants all the important people at his wedding. So it's like, he wants to have Logan there. And it doesn't matter that it's literally the bride's son. It's more important to have her ex-husband who's powerful because the man she's marrying, who by the way is like terrible.
Peter Munyon.
Peter Munyon. Yeah. So Jerry comes to the wedding. She's dating some guy. And remember, Roman has been slightly infatuated her. Roman
Although
has
she consistently positions Lori as someone that she's using for access as well, for back
True.
channels into the DOJ.
Yes. So he works at the DOJ. She's kind of using him.
Yeah,
but
she's
Roman,
one of them.
Yeah, 1,000%. So as they're here, the Gojo share price is ticking up. This is the sort of main critical point, is that we begin this episode with WayStar with an offer on the table to buy Gojo. Kendall obviously threw in this idea that maybe Gojo acquire WayStar. Gojo was smaller than WayStar at this point. But again, here, how do you value a company, or how do you figure out what the value is it's based on the share price. So share price is going up, the value of the business is going up with it.
Well, Mattson is tweeting. Happening at the beginning. So Mattson is tweeting. Going to Macau, feeling lucky. And that's the catalyst for the stock price to start ticking up. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Macau, it is a gambling center just like Vegas. So he's gambling
off of Hong Kong.
So he's gambling with the share price in the markets. And this is very akin to some of the things that have happened in recent corporate history that I think happened all after this aired, whether it's Elon talking about buying Twitter, whether it's Roaring Kitty talking about GameStop. This is not unfamiliar territory that we're in, and the show actually kind of like predicted a lot of these things.
I feel like that always happens where shows and movies and art, life imitates art. It always starts with art.
The Roys are convinced that he's trying to mess with them by making it too expensive as the share price starts to go up. Jerry's freaking out because she's like, the SEC is going to be all over this. And then Mattson tweets a video game controller, an eggplant emoji, and a fingers crossed emoji. Okay. So everyone's trying to like read the tea leaves of this cryptic tweet that is causing the stock price to go up.
Which reminds me of, again, it's like Trump, like Kofefi, where it's like he probably fell asleep on his phone and like tweeted a random thing. And people are like, what does this mean? Is this cryptic?
That's right. I forgot about Kofi. Yeah,
Kofefi or...
and Logan says, he's like, I'm not used to negotiating via eggplant, right? Like, this is not Logan Roy's jam. He is a mano a mano, like, let's all sit around the table and measure our dicks. And Mattson is like, I'm going to fuck with this guy because I can.
Yeah. And so as this is happening, Roman actually goes to talk to Peter, who is so obnoxious. And he asks like, hey, Mom, is there a prenup? And she doesn't actually answer. So we're not sure if there's a prenup here. I mean, she is worth quite a bit of money. She's marrying someone who is quite clearly marrying her for the access, possibly the money too. And she's like, nah, I don't know. Maybe, no prenup. I don't think there was.
And there is some motivation with a townhouse, right? Like some... townhouse that she was awarded in the divorce settlement, which
that's going to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so as they're at their wedding,
Logan tries to get Mattson on the phone. Mattson's not picking up. So Jerry sends Roman, who has clearly demonstrated an ability to get through to Mattson, to quote unquote translate before she says the banker meet. So this deal is progressing as all this is going on. There's a banker meet scheduled at some point that we don't know. And now Roman is deputized to go intervene on the Roy's behalf with Mattson to get him to stop tweeting.
Yeah, they're worried because Shiv, as she says it, she's like, if we blow this deal, there are no other options for them to buy. This is a legacy media death trap. We'll end up as Pan Am, Waystar, Blockbuster Video Dial-Up Corp. So they know that this is like kind of their last option. They need to somehow get on the future trade, right? Tech, growth, whatever. And this is basically like the only way to do that. So Roman is sent to have to go. So they like is it a boat? They get a boat and they sail off somewhere.
I think it's a helicopter to a boat. Because
probably,
they imply that he's like on Lake Como or something like that. So they've got to go from wherever they are in Chianti Shire over to Como.
So Logan goes to see Kendall. He's made him dinner. And Logan sits down and the waiter comes out with food. And the waiter goes to give the food to Logan, and Kendall goes, that's mine. And so he gives it to him. So Logan is worried that the food has been poisoned. Kendall's kids are there, and Kendall's kid comes out. And again, Logan thinks the food might be poisoned. And so he says to Kendall's son.
To his grandson.
To his own grandson. Kendall's son. Kendall is his son. So his grandson. Here, why don't you try a bite of the food? And Kendall's there horrified. Like, first of all, you thought I would poison you, but second, you're going to then test it out on your grandchild. So that in and of itself, like it's just, there's
a
thing after thing
continuation
after
of
thing
themes.
where it's,
it's never eat the food.
Never eat the food.
Tom actually made a reference when he was trying to acclimatize himself to the prison food that Rasputin used to take a daily dose of arsenic to try to build up a tolerance. So it's this whole theme of poison. And again, don't drink the water, don't eat the food, don't ever show any weakness. I mean, it's pretty insane that they went there. But of course, no one takes a bite of their food during this meal that's been prepared by this like Michelin star,
massive chef,
Tuscan chef. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Kendall basically says, look, he wants to take the offer. He's like, $2 billion was on the paper. I'll take a few employees, maybe get an asset and run a podcast or whatever. And he agrees he won't speak out about Logan.
Like any failed business person does, just running a podcast.
Seriously. Logan says that he needs to think about it. And Kendall's like, you offered this at my birthday party. And Logan was like, that was for fun. Kendall's like, you won. I'm better than you. I don't want to be you. And Logan brings back up the kid who died. And he said, whenever you fucked up, I cleaned up your shit. Logan gets up and he leaves.
There's also a really important line that he says. Kendall had tried to be this quote unquote white knight. And now we've talked about white knights before in the business context of somebody who comes in with a bunch of money to save a deal. But he's using it here in the more original metaphorical term of he wanted to be this moral white knight and come in and save the soul of the company. And that's what he thought he was doing. And after his birthday party, he is beyond broken down. Yep. And Logan says, life is not knights on horsebacks. It's a fight for a knife in the mud. And I think that that's such a critical insight into just how low he has gone, how low he is capable of going. And it sets the stage very nicely for ultimately the betrayal in the last episode, I think.
Yeah.
And this is Logan shutting the door on revenge for Kendall betraying him in season 2.
Yeah. And then the next scene also kind of sets the stage for what's going to happen at the end. So Shiv comes into Tom's room and Tom again.
Hang on, before that.
Yeah.
Shiv went to her mom's bachelorette party.
Oh, yeah. We forgot about
which is
part.
the most dysfunctional family interaction. Actually, that's not true. Just another one in a long line.
Just another normal one. Yep.
Right. And Caroline says in no uncertain terms, I never should have had you. Shiv says in no uncertain terms, hey, no hard feelings. I don't like you either.
Yeah.
And Caroline says to Shiv, basically, never have children.
Yeah.
You would be a terrible mother. I shouldn't have had children. We should not reproduce. This family line should end. Yeah. So Shiv goes home to Tom and says, let's have a baby. Because her mom just told her not to.
Exactly. Sorry, that was such a good point. So she says to Tom, let's have a baby. And Tom wants to have a kid. So he's all for it. But then they start, like, I think she said, I forget how they get into this whole conversation.
They start with their pillow talk.
Yeah. And then Shiv just starts to say just the nastiest things that she can, which is like, you're out of my league. I don't love you, but you want me anyway.
I'm too good for you.
I'm too good for you. Yeah. And the next morning, Tom asks about whether that was true, that she doesn't love him. And she doesn't say no, that it wasn't true. And he asks if she really wants a baby. And she was like, well, let's freeze embryos. And so she finally does say, I don't love you. Not only that, but I do love you.
Embryos. The conversation goes to them litigating who is going to have custody of these frozen embryos when one of them has died or they're divorced. So it's not this romantic, like, let's have a baby conversation. That was all just pillow talk last night. I guess I like to say weird things. It's the most clinical, legal conversation about custody of these hypothetical future embryos.
Yeah.
And he's shocked that that's where her brain immediately goes. Right?
Because he still just wants like a wife who just wants to love. He just wants someone who loves him, who wants to have a baby. Like that's like. He
was holding on to some last final shred of hope that she actually cared about. And this is the nail in the coffin. She has, the only time that he and Shiv get along is when they're both mocking Greg about his dating prowess.
Seriously.
Right? Like that's the only time where they're like hitting it off and bantering is where they're both just trying to tear Greg to shreds. And you're exactly right. She goes, oh, I don't love you.
Yeah.
I love you. Like, I mean, so.
I think she's just incapable of love. So like, that's the thing. She's just like a woman who's, I mean, and you see why. You see who her parents were. Of course she's incapable of love. She's like beyond effed up. So that was setting the stage for where Tom's head is going into the rest of the season. So Roman goes to see Matsson.
And at this point, Gojo's market cap is approaching WayStar.
Yeah.
So we already know that. And Matsson, again, Matsson's super funky. So he is like, Roman, I want to know like your fears and your weaknesses. Like failure is all that interests me about humans. And then he's like, also I'm thinking about quarterly up or outs at the company, like, you know, basically firing a bunch of people. Like he is all over the place and he's trying to throw Roman off his game. And Roman finally just comes out and asks him about the tweet. He's like, were you trying to get your share price up, right? By tweeting something outside the quote unquote normal disclosure channels? And Matsson goes, I'm Swedish. I'm into equality. Like, I want a merger of equals.
Yes.
And Roman's like, are you just trying to blow this all up? And he's like, no, I want the best of everything, right?
Yeah.
I want the best deal.
Yeah. And so just to sort of give you guys an idea. So when you talk about an acquisition versus a merger of equals, an acquisition is where you have one company buying another. And so the company that is being bought is going to give up their shares. And in exchange, they either get shares in the company that's acquiring them. So if you were Gojo getting acquired by WayStar, you would either, you know, give up your shares and you would get shares of WayStar, or you could get cash if it was an all cash deal. So there's all stock deals, all cash deals, and then there's something in between where you can have 50-50 cash stock, whatever. But again, if there was one company acquiring the other, that's what would happen, right? That the target, the company being bought, would tender their shares, they would get the new shares. Merger of equals is when you have two companies about the same size that come together to form a single new company. And so in that case, shareholders from both firms surrender and receive the shares issued by this new entity. So there is no financing, right? It's just both companies are going to surrender. So this is actually a really important point that's going to come back in a second. It was starting off that WayStar was buying Gojo. Now, because their share prices are about the same, it's a merger of equals, but that share price is going to keep going up. So that's where ultimately Gojo is going to become the acquirer. But how Shiv and the kids figure it out, this merger of equals is actually an important point.
So Roman comes back from that meeting and he kind of gives everyone the download saying that Matsson's angling for this merger of equals. Jerry's like, well, listen, if we don't beef up soon, we're going to end up someone's lunch. So she's starting to realize that they may start to become an acquisition target. When Roman is explaining Matsson's position, Logan asks very straightforward, is Matsson a Twitter panty flasher or a serious person? And Roman kind of dances around it and tries to speak in like finance terms. And he's like, he thinks there's value that hasn't been fully priced in yet. You know, he's talking about Gojo as a growth machine, et cetera, et cetera. All Logan cares about at the end of the day, it isn't even like the exact structure of the deal so much as making sure that Matsson is fucking with him for business reasons. He wants to, he very much needs to ascertain that. He's like, if Matsson's a clown, I'm not doing any of this. But if this guy is playing games for business reasons, I'll play ball. And I think that's a very important
that's a
thing.
really important point. I didn't realize that, but that's actually a really good point. So
and so then they all sit down. Then they all go in. I think they go into Milan to
and this is where the Credit Suisse. Yes, this must be where the Credit Suisse office is. Okay, so they all sit down. They're all around the table, and I think that actually Logan even says like, "Good work, kid," to Roman.
Yes.
For whatever reason, Roman decides
this is Roman's time to do a victory lap. For whatever reason, this is his
and
victory
he has to
lap.
self-sabotage. But that's the thing.
Well,
he's like
he's not trying to self-sabotage.
I don't know. I think he is. But yeah.
You think he tried to send that picture to his dad?
Oh, no. But I think that like he just can't get it together. Like if things are going right, he has to do something to fuck up. So what happens is he tries to send a dick pic to Jerry.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing it to self-sabotage. I think that's his character. That's how he takes a victory lap. He sends a picture of his dick to Jerry. Like, I did this. This meeting is all me. Look at me.
So he sends the picture to Jerry. And next thing you see, Logan's phone buzzes. And Logan like takes his phone, puts on his glasses. Like, what the fuck? Why did my son just send me a picture of his dick? So I think he like walks out of the room. Shiv goes. And Logan's just like, what the heck is this? And Shiv tells Logan, like, he probably meant to send this to Jerry. Again, knowing full well what she's saying when she says that.
Yes.
And Jerry is not stopping it, probably using it for leverage.
Yeah.
So now Logan wants to fire Jerry, who's the interim CEO. And they're just like, well, that's not a good look. Like, you're going to fire her for being sexually harassed? Shiv goes to Jerry and is like...
Shiv goes to Jerry playing the concerned female.
Yeah.
Trying to suss out Jerry's position and trying to see if she can use this to torpedo Roman, who otherwise would be doing his victory lap for bagging Matsson, right? Which Shiv is still pissed about. Yes. And Shiv is like, you know, Jerry, do you want to make a formal complaint? You should really report it all the way up to the board, because if you don't show strength about this, you know, think about how it would impact your position as CEO, right? So she's like, Shiv is trying to assassinate Roman and Jerry all in one fell swoop, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jerry's not playing ball. She knows exactly what cards she has now up her sleeve. Yeah. She extricates herself from the situation and fully entrenches her position.
Yep. And in the last scene, you see Kendall lying on a raft in the pool with a beer face down. It almost seems like he was trying to see what it would be like to not be able to breathe underwater, like what happened to the cater waiter after his dad's, I think he specifically mentioned something.
At the dinner, Logan was asking Kendall, like, how long do you think he was still alive in the car?
Yeah.
You know, what was it like when he finally decided to take a breath, and trying to force Kendall to relive the trauma of having killed that man. And so you're exactly right. I do think that Kendall has a bunch of drinks, is lying out in the Tuscan sun. His kids are all around the pool. They go inside. And the implication in that last scene is that Kendall passes out and almost
I thought
drowns.
He was trying. Yeah, but I thought it was like more purposeful.
It may have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they definitely leave that ambiguous.
They leave it ambiguous. They always seem to do that. And again, we'll get to that at the very end. But so now into episode 9, it opens with Kendall. My takeaway was that he had tried to kill himself at the pool. And so Logan is actually reading to Kendall's kids and saying, you know, he's okay. And
he's reading his like 10-year-old child like a nursery rhyme book,
which is for someone like us, I think we probably picked up on that a little more. Like a kid who's that age does not read a nursery rhyme book. That's for a 2 to 5 year olds. That is not for a 10-year-old. Like, he clearly has like no relationship with his grandkids. He tried to poison his grandkids.
It's not because Logan's out of touch with what he asked the child, shouldn't you be reading something a little more sophisticated than this? And his sister's like, no, he likes it sometimes. You could tell this child is traumatized.
Yeah.
This child is traumatized. He thought his dad was just dead.
Right.
Yeah. His absentee father. I do think there was an implication that he was struggling with some learning things too in a very early episode in season 1. But this is a child who they hint at struggling mentally and emotionally consistently as a result of Kendall's lack of good parenting.
Right. So we find out that they had to basically keep him overnight in the hospital, but he is going to be okay. The kids, so like Connor, Willa, Roman, Shiv, are all sitting around playing Monopoly. And Jerry comes in and says that the DOJ is going to hit us up with a historic fine, and Gojo's market cap has now overtaken ours. So that merger of equals might now be off the table. Logan comes out, says to Roman that he wants to go see Matsson again. And they sit down and they talk to Matsson. And Matsson now wants to know, is he okay if Gojo acquires WayStar? And he's saying, like, WayStar has this legal trouble and you're old. And Logan is saying no.
So when Matsson and Logan are talking, Roman all of a sudden is no longer part of the conversation, right? He gets totally demoted during this meeting. He has blown it. Even though he was the original inroads to Matsson, he is now no longer has a seat at the table. He basically just was like Logan's escort to this meeting. He does not have a real voice in this.
Yeah.
Logan is asserting still the value of WayStar. Yeah. And Matsson says, listen, it makes more sense for us to buy you instead. I want control, but I'll make it nice for you. Okay. I want to honor you. You're the elder statesman. I have all this respect for you. We'll make Roman the face of the family. All right. We know that Logan's done with Roman for right now, right? He wants Roman. He
wants nothing to do with him.
Chateau
He's disgusted by him.
Yeah.
Well, he's disgusted. Because by the way, I mean, Jerry is, she's probably 50, 60, and Roman is probably in his like late 20s, early 30s. And so Logan is just disgusted. The irony is Logan, meanwhile, is in his 80s and sleeping with his assistant who's also in her 20s, but details.
Well, and Logan wants to quote unquote straighten Roman
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah, yeah.
on the private wooden glossy boat shuttle to Lake
Yeah.
Como, Roman and his dad are sitting there ogling Kerry, and Logan is like, that's a good looking woman right there. Like, what do you think, Roman? Trying to
Well, yeah.
like suggest that
But-
Roman is this deviant. And it's like, he's
But-
equally deviant.
Because then what comes out is that he's been trying to eat really healthy because they basically start to believe that he's gearing up to try to have a baby with his
Correct.
assistant
With
Carrie,
Carrie, yeah.
who again, he is in his 80s and she is late 20s, early 30s also, yet Roman is the deviant, and he's still married. Oh yeah, details.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, the kids do not like this idea of possibly having another sibling
that they have to compete with. Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you're right. At the end of that meeting, Matsson does say, well, maybe we can talk about an asset swap or something like that. It is very clear that this merger of equals doesn't seem like it's on the table anymore. No. And Roman is out. He's excluded from the further conversation. Logan stays behind to talk to Matsson, and we do not know the content of that conversation.
Right. So Roman comes back. He meets up with his siblings, which is clearly an intervention for Kendall. And Jerry comes up and she says that she heard that some investment bankers just got on a PJ to go meet with Matsson. And Shiv is the one who starts to speculate. She's like, well, that's weird because if it was a merger of equals, then it should be all stock, no financing, right? No debt. Why would Matsson need financing for an all stock deal? And
they find out that Lion Tree is in town too. Lion Tree is a boutique investment
the private
bank.
credit. Oh, okay. And so again, both companies' shareholders should be surrendering their shares for a newly combined entity. So Frank, Carl, they're in Europe. A bunch of M&A advisors are also meeting with Matsson. And so Shiv is getting frantic. And Roman finally comes clean about when they met with Matsson that he had floated the idea that maybe Gojo buys us. So the kids are beside themselves. So Shiv goes to Kendall.
Being cut out.
They think they're being cut out. Because remember, right, if Matsson buys the company, there's no need for a successor to WayStar anymore because it's Matsson. So Shiv goes to see Kendall and says she wants to talk about the company. She wants basically a line to Stewie and Frank. And Kendall goes with Shiv and Roman. They're together in an alley. And this is where Kendall doesn't want to talk about basically anything. He just tried to kill himself. Like everything has gone to shit. And he says, Shiv, something is wrong with me. I'm not feeling connected to any of my children or my endeavors. I tried to do something. I took a shot, but it didn't matter. I thought I had an out. I could see it. I tried, but I'm not a good person. I'm bad. And this is where he finally admits about having killed the kid at the wedding. This one scene, it's like, I think one of just the most powerful scenes with the kids where they're trying to be there for him. And they are. It's like through this entire season, Kendall has been by himself. He hasn't had his family. And now here they are in this alley. And he says, I killed that kid at your wedding and they're going to come for me. And Roman, when he hears about it, he says, it sounds like the road and the water killed him. And Roman asks if he ran. Kendall says, no, I tried to get him. I died a few times. Roman keeps trying to make him feel better. And Shiv comes back and confirms that the Matsson deal is going. She says, Laird called. He's in the deal, but he has been cucked out of the lead. So it's bitter and bleeding. But so what I assume is happening is that he thought he was going to be the lead M&A advisor. He's been their longtime banker. He's been with them forever. So they're now we got to stop this. So all three siblings now want to go see Logan.
Just one point on before they go to see Logan and about this emotional scene between the three siblings, which I agree with you. It's one of the best scenes and it's the most powerful. It is really interesting because on the one hand, you see this very human thing. Kendall is finally confessing to the murder, accidental death, whatever you want to call it, that has been eating him up inside. And that has been the entire reason that his dad has his thumb on him.
Yeah.
Shiv and Roman are trying to make him feel better. Roman's kind of cracking jokes about how it was hard to get you did the right thing, right?
He was like, well, no wonder it was hard to get a drink at your wedding, right? You were down a waiter. Yeah. So he's trying to just make light of it, make him feel better.
But you always have to wonder, how much is he trying to bring Kendall emotionally back from the brink? Because the kids need to band together in order to save themselves now in this deal that they're being cut out of. And how much do they legitimately want to help their suicidal brother who is at the emotional depths of his, you have to ask the question, would they be there comforting Kendall if they didn't need Kendall? to join
no.
forces with them.
Absolutely not. No.
Well,
No.
I think with Roman, it's never really clear. I don't know. And I think you do see like a little bit of humanity come out in them. But
well, the thing is that I don't think so, mostly just because the reason that they are banding together is because they've all been screwed over. And I think
Right.
that there is this common, just like you find allies when you are all in the same position. And I
Right.
think that that's what's bonding them together in this
It is.
moment. Like it's always about being forced out and being stabbed in the back by somebody else that brings them together. Now, again, do they love each other? Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing we're going to see in the next season when like something big happens. But like, I do think that, no, I don't think they would have been, they definitely wouldn't have been there because they wouldn't have need him, right? Like they were only with him right now. Yes, I guess he did just like
or had
have a
he
huge...
confessed at the intervention before they knew that they were about to be cut out of the deal?
Point.
Had he confessed to the murder then, or accidental death, whatever you want to call it, had he confessed then, would they have tried to make him feel better in the same way? Because, you know, you notice, right? They're playing Monopoly during this whole scene, during this intervention, right? It's very much a metaphor for what they're doing. They're accumulating weapons against each other, right? I'm shocked that they weren't playing Risk and didn't just hit you over the head with it.
But yeah,
Okay,
so
they all get in the car together.
So they talk about like what they think is going to happen, right? So again, with any merger, there is a premium. So Gojo pays a premium, Dad cashes out, he keeps the title, takes a few assets, it's cash and stock. So this is where they now figure out, right? Because Gojo was buying WayStar, they could have done an all stock deal. And actually, when we get into the course, I'll talk about the fact that like it actually would have made a lot more sense for it to have been an all stock deal because, well, a couple of things. When you're evaluating whether you should do cash or stock, I mean, there are two parties. So the seller has to agree to whatever it is. So my guess is like, if this was happening in real life, the board of directors is probably not going to be okay with an all stock deal from Gojo because their acquisition currency, I would argue, is almost like starting to be like Monopoly money. That's the thing, actually. And that was, even we're talking about Monopoly in AOL when they bought Time Warner. When you have a huge company where like the AOL example, there was this tech bubble and the value of AOL was trading at
today.
like 89 times. Right. But the point is it was trading at this massive inflated valuation. So AOL bought Time Warner, this legacy media company, but the value of that acquisition currency was like Monopoly money. Right. And so ultimately the value of that acquisition currency came crashing down and it just wiped out a ton of shareholder value. But for the buyer, it would make more sense for them to do all stock. Now, again, I do think that the seller, it does not make sense for Waystar to accept that acquisition currency. But Gojo would not have been able to afford more than that because, well, two reasons. Number one, when you have companies that are less stable, it's going to be a lot more expensive for them to borrow. There's also only so much debt capacity that they have. So when you think about borrowing money, it's usually as some multiple of EBITDA, and there's only so high you can get. So in like the most risky of companies, like a private equity sponsor deal, a leveraged buyout, you're going to look at maybe 6 to 7 times for a very stable, steady company. Gojo is not that. So they don't have a ton of debt capacity, which means they have to do some stock. But again, the 50-50, I do think that they probably don't have the debt capacity. Again, in my fake business that I have created, which I, by the way, have created little operating and merger models for this deal because I'm a psychopath. But so anyway, so that's the structure of this transaction. It is cash and stock, a mixture of the shareholders of Waystar getting actual cash, where again, Waystar is financing that by raising debt, as well as shares of Gojo. And anyway, so they said it's going to be Matson's fucking board. We've got to stop this. So now all the siblings want to go see Logan. Roman says, I don't think we should. It's too aggressive, which is hilarious because he's always the one who wants the most aggressive response to anything, but
not when it comes to going up against his dad.
Not when it comes to going up against his dad. And so Shiv is angry and says that this deal means that dad doesn't think any of us can take over. And Roman asks, well, can we stop him? And Kendall says, yes, a change of control needs a super majority in the holding company. Mom got us that in the divorce. He'd need us on board. Roman says, I'm not sure I want to pull out a move like that. And so they pull out the fact that dad thinks there's something wrong with him, with Roman, because of the whole thing with Jerry. And they need to get the shareholder vote to push dad out. Shiv then goes ahead and calls Tom and tells Tom what they're doing.
Well, they're all on the phone calling as many allies as they can to try to get everyone aligned with them.
Yeah.
So Kendall's on the phone. Roman's on the phone. They're in this car. They're headed to the venue. They're going to try to bust down the door and walk in there and say, we got you, Logan. Right? Everything hinges on this change of control provision that you mentioned.
With the
and that is
settlement.
something that was a result of Logan and Caroline's divorce settlement. Exactly. While Kendall and Roman are on the phone with whomever they are trying to curry favor with, Shiv calls Tom to let him know about her great victory. That this is I have the trump card. I'm going to play this ace up my sleeve and I'm going to stop my dad. All because of this change of control provision. No one else tells anyone about the change of control provision.
Yep. And so Tom sits down with Greg and says, things may be in motion. Do you want to come with me? And Greg asks if he can have more info. And Tom's basically like, no. But he says he might need a tech dog, a Gregweiler, which was like, and Greg asks if he can get his own Greg. And Tom says, do you want to deal with the devil? Greg says, well, what am I going to do with a soul anyway? Souls are boring. Boo souls, which was like the writing with them always just cracks me up.
When Tom and Greg are having this conversation.
Yeah.
Tom has just had the conversation with Shiv about how Shiv is going to waltz in and be the winner. And Tom is saying, do you want to sign a deal with the devil? It seems like he's on board
going with Shiv.
With Shiv. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So the siblings, they show up at the room where Logan is. I mean, it probably took them a little while to get there. So Logan is in with the bankers and everyone, and they see Logan and they say, we hear you might be the target now. And Logan says he'll share the info, but not with Kendall, and tells Roman to take Kendall out because he doesn't trust Kendall. And Roman
and by the way, like
Kendall
Logan's all smiles, welcome, come in. Like, of course. Like, I just hadn't gotten around to calling you guys yet. We've just been so busy. It happened so fast. I wasn't trying to cut you guys out, right?
Yep. Logan's starting to explain, like, well, the market capitalizations, remember that is the equity value where you're looking at the market value of the equity, not the book value. But anyway, the market capitalizations of our firms have been on the move. We are a declining business. There have been a wave of consolidations happening that mean this is the optimal moment, in my opinion, to make a deal with some serious tech operations like Gojo. And that is what I have been exploring. And so Shiv asks that they can pause so they can see how they will all be impacted, which, by the way, like, it is kind of wild. I mean, when I was watching this, I was like, clearly this is the move that they should do for strategic reasons. Like, I actually think it makes complete sense because they are going to go the way, as they said, of Pan Am, of freaking Blockbuster. Like, they have to do something, but they're so concerned about what happens to them. I initially was on the side of the siblings when I watched it the first time. Now I'm like, you guys are so selfish. Like, just, like, this doesn't make any sense. Even Jerry was saying that, where she's like, I have to do what's right for the shareholders. This is the right move for the shareholders. But they're so, again, in their own heads.
That's not Jerry's entire motivation either, because Shiv put her between a rock and a hard place with the whole Roman Dick thing.
That's true.
So
but I do
Jerry's
think
not
that
like some noble person who's defending the shareholders' interests.
Despite what was going on with Roman, she's not going to, like, not do the deal because it's not good for the siblings. Like, she doesn't care that much.
No, she doesn't care about the siblings. It's better to do the deal for her.
Yeah,
she
but
gets
I still
to
think
retain some power in this case because she's part of the deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I still was less cynical on Jerry.
Counsel.
I do think she would have, like, I do think because they do have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders, I think they probably would have cared a little bit, maybe not, but, like, I don't know. I was less cynical on the Jerry front, but I hear you. I think that there was probably the motivation for her, and then there was just, like, what was better for the company. And so Shiv asks if they can pause. Logan says no because he feels that this is the deal that they should make in his bones. He's like, this is the best moment to sell. If I don't get out, I leave $5 billion on the table. And Kendall asks, what are you going to do with that $5 billion? Put it on the table with your other billion? Logan says yes. And Kendall asks, well, what are we supposed to do? To which he replies, make your own pile. This is a chance for you to get an education. And so Shiv replies, well, without you at the top, we can take over, but without you, we're fucked. And Logan gets up and says, okay, well, come on, Roman, let's get away from these Jacobins. Because Logan does think that Roman will come with him. He's like, I've got you. And so Roman replies, with Matsson calling the shots, we're strung up in the town square. And Logan says, no, he rates you. You have my word. You can trust me. To which Shiv says, you can't trust him. She has been fucked over and told that so many times. And Kendall also is sitting there shaking his head. Because again, they still think that they've got Logan. And Roman, he's trying to, again, like son to father, say, look, can you please not do this deal? And Logan says, well, what if I decide not to listen to you? And Shiv now says, we can stop you. You need our votes for a change of control. And we will stop you. We will blow this thing up. You need a super majority and we can stop you and blow it up. So Logan now, he realizes that they are ready to turn on him, that there's no loyalty. And he screams, fuck off.
This was all just a test, this whole conversation.
Yeah.
He knows that he has them no matter what. He has them dead to rights. He's been entertaining this whole conversation as a test, knowing that he had the trump card the whole time.
Yep. And so as soon as he says that I have you beat, he turns to Carrie and says, is she still on? And he reveals, he's like, yeah, Logan calls Caroline and Logan says, your mother and I have been reviewing some of the terms of the divorce agreement and we've agreed upon some arrangements that were a little antiquated. Caroline on the other end just says, I can't get into it. All right. I think everything will be fine. And Shiv says, Mom, you just slit our throats. And Caroline says, well, Peter is very excited. I'm sorry. Shiv says, we just walked in on our mom and dad fucking us because.
Yeah. So remember, the whole point of inviting Logan to the wedding was because Peter Munyon wanted to curry favor with Logan, and Logan had no interest in doing anything for Caroline and her new husband. But in exchange for changing this provision from their divorce agreement, he's now given, I forget, it was like some townhouse or some stupid shit or whatever.
That and like, yeah,
calling in some favor for Peter
with
for
the
like
DOJ
a local election.
Yeah. That was what it was. Like, he had asked if he knew someone somewhere. Yeah. So there was a lot of, I mean, again, Peter, so this was
Logan
all for
called
Peter.
In for some like silly favor for Caroline's new husband, who's not part of the family, you know?
Yep.
And she sold out her children for that favor for her new husband.
And so Roman still thinks that he might be able to salvage this. And he just looks at his dad. He looks at Logan. He says, please. And Logan says, well, what do you have in your hand? And Roman replies, love. And Logan just laughs. He says, you should have trusted me. Roman asks why. He says, because it works. I fucking win. And Shiv says, well, who told him we were coming? And Roman goes to Jerry and says, he's not well. You can help us, right? And to which she replies, she's like, I'm focused on whatever outcome serves the financial interest of the company, but it doesn't serve my interest. How does it serve my interest? That's the thing. I actually don't think it really served her interest either. She says that.
No, she's
like,
saying helping you doesn't serve my interest.
That's
what she says. Helping you doesn't serve my interest. Why should I help you? Yeah.
Okay. Which actually, you know, it's funny because backtracking, we didn't talk about this one little point. They find some homeless man that during Kendall's bachelor party, they basically forced him or whatever, thought it'd be funny to get Kendall's letters tattooed on his head. His initials. And so they basically want to go after him as blackmail against Kendall. And they find this homeless man and they were able to basically pay him to get pictures. Roman is really proud of himself. And he goes to Jerry and he's like, we got the pictures. And she's like, don't do anything with that. Like, that's going to hurt you as much as it's going to hurt him. You need to get tattooed on your face. How does it serve my interest? So it's actually interesting that she's turning it around to him because, again, it's the same thing. Like,
that's
you
exactly
have to be smart.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Roman thought that there was some love between him and Jerry, the same way he thought that love mattered between him and his dad. And Jerry just says, Jerry has no love for him. Right? Even if she does, even if they did have this weird little thing with each other, it doesn't serve her interest. That's why she goes with Logan.
Yep. And so at the end, Logan walks out, and as Tom walks in, Logan puts his hand on Tom's shoulder, which basically is a sign that it was actually Tom who tipped him off and
just
betrayed
the same way
Shiv.
that he put his hand on Tom's shoulder when he says, I'll remember this, when Tom was willing to go to jail for Logan.
Yep.
So Tom has betrayed Shiv and the siblings, and Shiv sees this, and she just has this moment where she realizes that it was him who stabbed her in the back. And it's such a good little piece of acting because he's coming there and he is ostensibly comforting her, right?
Yeah. Because he doesn't.
What happened, Shiv?
I don't know. What's going on?
What could it be? Yeah, who would have done such a thing? And she realizes now that she's in bed with the devil and Tom has betrayed her. Yep. And so the deal with the devil that Tom was striking was getting back
with Logan. Yeah. So anyway, such great writing. So good.
It's phenomenal.
So this is probably going to be a two-parter, which I'm okay with. But anyway, I'm happy we did this.
Try to get on season 4 a little quicker. Yeah. Hopefully we can have season 4 in the bag too for you guys soon. I know it took us about 6 months to get.
Because then we also are going to have to do
season 1 to season 2.
Because we're going to have to start the industry. We keep getting so many people asking us about the industry.
Guys, if you've stayed to the end of this episode, let us know which you want us to prioritize, the industry or Billions. I'm with you. I think we should do the industry first because I think it's shorter because I think it got canceled after like its second season.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
industry will be
Billions
easier.
is like 9 seasons.
Yeah. So we're going to probably do the industry and then we'll do Billions because Billions is good. And I am excited to see how true to form some of the finances. But thank you guys for sticking with us and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.